Oh, bugger my butthole with a baguette. Is it already the end of May? Damn, time sure flies when you spend like 25% of your month sat motionless on the sofa with your buddy watching whatever autoplays on YouTube after the last video you watched. Good week though. Let me just pick a game to review. I thought originally about picking up Claire Obscura because it seems to be the internet's darling, and a few clips I saw on YouTube made it look really fun, but I will confess, for me, £50 per game is still something of a tall ask, and being an adult I do have bills to pay, also a crippling Warhammer 40k addiction that I need to fuel constantly. I recently bought a squad of Primera Space Marines for a custom chapter idea I'm working on. Please forgive the terrible paint job, I'm not good at it. And not long after that I grabbed a second squad of Mega Knobs to get my main squad up to 6. I don't need them, any of them, but this is my life now. I also bought an extra squad of boys. And knobs. They're on the ways. So I have to decide on a game. Most of what I've played recently has been Fallout 4, which I've already reviewed before. Granted, it was under the former channel name, and I have kind of adjusted my views on the game slightly, so maybe it could be worth revisiting properly, but I can't be arsed right now. I also played Demon's Souls, which I already reviewed before, again under the old channel banner, so I could revisit it for the sake of it, but I cannot be butthole to do so. Oh, and Lords of the Fallen as well, not to be confused with Lords of the Fallen, which again I've already reviewed, but this time under the current channel banner, and that would just be double dipping. Granted, my review of Lords of the Fallen, not to be confused with Lords of the Fallen, didn't even mention a few things like a late game bug that sort of fucked my friend out of progress, and the fact that the online co-op is so shaky you'd think it was built from corroded sheet metal on top of a fault line, because either of those things are definitely acceptable in a finished product almost 2 years after launch. I swear I was starting to like it as well. Me and my friend were playing it together and we were having a laugh, but then shit hit the ventilator, as they say, and I think it justifiably killed his interest in continuing when he literally couldn't continue because a key item he needed didn't spawn. The worst part about that bug, the developers know it exists and they claim to have fixed it in a recent patch, but they didn't, because we still haven't got the key, so he can't progress. Sorry, I'll get back on track now. As is normal when I'm out of ideas, I did some browsing on a PlayStation Store discount section for poor smelly losers like myself, and the game I put on my wishlist like ages ago was on sale for the first time ever, or if it had been on sale before, PlayStation didn't tell me because fuck me, I guess. Honestly, whenever I put something on my Sony wishlist, there's like a 50% chance Sony won't tell me if it's on sale, because whilst they might have won the arbitrary console war for this generation, they didn't do so by being good, they did so by not being the worst on the market. I'd say Sony is going downhill, but this is the games industry and downhill seems to be the preferred direction for most things within it to move, so it's not exactly news. It would honestly be more noteworthy if even a month went by without something fucking up in a significant enough way to make me sigh so hard I crack a rib. Right, anyway, the game I picked up. Planet of Lana, it's called. It's a side-scrolling puzzle game which almost fits into the small child versus big scary world subgenre, with its small child and big scary world you must survive in, but unlike something like Limbo or Inside or Little Nightmares or Guilt, it has a much friendlier, less horror appearance that doesn't require a player to get a top up on their antidepressants before engaging. Plus it was only like £7 and that works for me. I don't know why, but it seems that £7 is generally the price that I'm most willing to pay for a piece of entertainment media without then bitching about it for 90 minutes. Anyhow, I bought Planet of Lana, installed it, played for 4 hours, and then stopped because the game had ended. And you know what? Fair enough, we don't have to drag stuff out, and I do have laundry to do and plastic crack to paint, so we'll be looking at Planet of Lana today. A small, simple puzzle em-up that knows what it is, how to play to its strengths, and ultimately it made more impact on my mind in only 4 hours than Atomfall did in nearly 20. Hope you enjoyed. Do the like and comment thing if you do, and also if you want to. I can't force you. Not until I initiate Operation Impending Doom 2 and complete my galactic conquest, but I still haven't got enough snacks stored up in my spaceship for that, so you got lucky today, internet. Anyway, let's get on with it. Planet of Lana is, at its core, an incredibly simple game when talking about it from a purely mechanical perspective. It does have a couple of features that make it stand out as its own thing, but the game has clearly taken efforts to keep the moving parts as straightforward as possible, and as such doesn't suffer from mechanical bloat. Control-wise, here's what we're working with. If you've played any side-scrolling platformer games, then you'll know what to expect. You can move left and right with the left stick, you can jump with X, holding L2 makes you crouch, and pressing square lets you move certain contextual objects. A short ways into the game, you'll be joined by a small cat creature who you can control. You can tell him where to go with R1, and you can also tell him to interact with certain environmental details such as holes, ropes and cables with the triangle button. If you press circle, the cat sits down where it is. If you hold circle, the cat resumes following you. And, most importantly, if you crouch down next to the cat and press square, you will pet the cat. I am genuinely really happy that that's a thing we can do in the game. That just makes me smile. Oh, and also later on, if you press and hold R2, you can control certain living things with the cat, you know, as cats do 2. That's the controls of Planet of Lana. Like I said, it's an incredibly simple game, and as such, I think it makes for a very accessible game. Because it will be a very short subsection, I would like to now take some time to bring up the 2 complaints I have about the gameplay of Planet of Lana. Sometimes our little protagonist just won't move when I tell her to, and sometimes she won't jump when I tell her to. Granted, both of these situations were fairly infrequent, but I still think it's kinda worth bringing up because otherwise this already pitifully short section would be even shorter. The other complaint comes in when the game reuses the same send the cat up a cliff to push a rope down for you puzzle several times, which I just thought was a little bit lazy. Again though, it's not a monumental problem, more just a boy howdy, sure are a lot of conveniently pre-tied ropes for us to use situation. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, I had to dig pretty hard to find those 2 things to complain about because the game just doesn't have a whole lot to begin with. It has only the mechanics it needs to allow you to solve the puzzles, plus the game is almost entirely linear with only a few occasional hidden paths leading to these shrines that you can find and look at. They don't really serve any mechanical purpose in the game, but they are nice to look at. Speaking of being nice to look at, I absolutely adore the art direction of this game. The backgrounds all have that painted look to them and make a good use of vibrant colours without ever becoming visually overstimulating. The character models in-game are designed deliberately to be very simple, but there's still a noticeable amount of character to Lana, her sister, to Mui, to the robots that we need to avoid. The game's art style is a lot like the gameplay itself. It's not more complicated than it needs to be, but it also makes sure that everything we need is present. I think the only thing that I don't love about the art design of this game is that the human characters all have these beady little eyes, but then again I don't really hate it either, it's just not my favourite aspect of the style. I personally think the human characters in-game would look better with no facial details whatsoever, but that's just me and I'm not exactly cross about what we have. The game also has an amazing soundtrack. The song that I've left playing in the background of this section, and probably the others, appears about 3/4 of the way into the game, but it perfectly captures the vibe of the adventure we happen to be on. Every area and moment that it would make sense to have music in has music in, and the music is always really well crafted for the particular experience we are having. There's not much else left to say about this particular area of the game. Sound effects like footsteps, beeps and grunts all sound high quality, but are never so loud as to be distracting. Yeah, no, I can't think of anything else. On an audio-visual level, I think Planet of Lana is as close to perfection as it's probably possible for a game to be. The main gameplay of Planet of Lana is basically puzzle solving, and said puzzles themselves aren't anything overly complicated. I think the longest I was stuck trying to figure one out was about 2 minutes, but if I'm being honest, I think this works to keep the pace of the game in the right place. Generally speaking, Planet of the Lana person is well designed and clearly made by developers who knew what they wanted to put together, so didn't get caught up trying to overstuff the experience with unnecessary padding or superfluous mechanics. In the second half of the game we start to see a few QuickTime events pop up, but they're not particularly intrusive and they all feel generous enough to not be annoying. I have a low reaction speed at the best of times and I passed all of them with flying colours. So the game does contain some measure of challenge, but I don't think challenge is what the game is all about. It's more accurately an experience that knows to offer something for the player to feel a sense of accomplishment, but doesn't go overboard to an extent where it leaves you banging your head on a wall trying to figure out how to go forwards for an hour. The game does often make use of as many of its mechanics as possible for the puzzles, including hostile entities, the tall grass you can hide in, a few murder holes, a means of controlling the entities around you if you can incapacitate them or reach a machine box to assume direct control, and this amalgamation of several very straightforward challenges does make the puzzle element a lot more enjoyable than it otherwise would be. And yeah, that's the gameplay of this particular video game. Well, I guess you can also swim. You won't use that much though. Honestly, I like it quite a lot. It's a very chilled out, laid back sort of adventure, even considering what the story is doing. I had a pretty good time. It was fun enough to keep me going, but I will gladly admit that the visuals and music did a lot of the work there, but you know what? For a game like this, I don't hate that. It might not be the most vicious, nail-biting experience you'll ever encounter, but it is a very nice time, and after all, there's no reason a video game can't strive to just be a pleasant distraction for a few hours. Now, let's talk about the story. Planet of Lana takes place on a planet and follows a girl named Lana. Stop me if this gets too complicated for you. Lana and her sister Elo live in a small fishing village on a not-Earth planet. One evening, the two are out visiting the graves of who I assume are their parents when their pleasant and peaceful lives are uprooted by an alien robot invasion. And Lana, being separated from Elo when Elo was captured, must now reach a giant alien megastructure in the distance to rescue everyone who was taken. Along the way, she'll meet a cat creature that has a limited ability to control aspects of the natural world around it, who she then calls Mui. They then team up to to reach and rescue the captives. The story being so basic means that I can't really reveal a whole lot because there's not honestly a whole lot to reveal. Given the premise that I laid out, I can bet that anyone who's ever read a story or played a video game before could probably assume how events play out. We have the moment of hopelessness when everything has changed, we have the scene where our useful ally gets separated from us, we of course have the fake out death, which I will admit is the only thing about the story that I actively dislike. I just consider it lazy writing, but all the plot elements that we experience are fairly predictable. On the one hand, this means that spoiling the game isn't really an issue because based on the general tone of the game, do you really think we don't save the day at the end? But on the other hand, I can completely understand and respect why this particular method of storytelling is just not everyone's cup of tea. If you are a fan of deep and complex narratives with heavy dialogue, then you're probably not going to gel with Planet of Lana. I, however, happen to like this approach, and I will say that the writers and designers of this game clearly knew what they wanted to make and how to make it. They knew that the lack of dialogue meant they'd have to rely on visual details and musical cues to deliver plot elements, and those are pretty well nailed. Again, there are not many deep plot points to grasp, but what we are presented with is done so competently and with such a clear understanding of the limits of this kind of storytelling. The game is really good at communicating through context. There's nothing actually saying that Lana and Elo are siblings or even related, but through suggestion we pick this up. Based on its location, their home is clearly some sort of fishing community, which I also take from Lana's ability to swim. I'd like to add to that Lana's more clumsy climbing and movement suggest to me that she's still very much learning how to navigate the world. There are also elements left up to interpretation, a big one being the motivation of the alien robots and what they're doing. It is never made explicitly clear. They kidnapped everyone, sure, but when we actually breach their facility, our people aren't being tortured, they're being held in small rooms with what look to be comfy beds and access to plenty of food. So clearly these hostile entities that we're up against have more going on beneath the surface. My theory ended up being that these machines hail from a greater empire headed by an artificial intelligence that wishes to preserve sapient life for as long as possible, so when it finds a new group of people, it removes them to safe zones where it can tend to and monitor their well-being, but such an action would of course be perceived as hostility by the victims themselves. I could be completely wrong now, and I don't think we'll ever get an actual answer as to why the robots were doing what they were, but if I'm being completely honest with you, I don't think we need one. I think the sense of mystery and just how unknowable the drive behind their actions is makes them a more interesting force, and I personally believe that we'd lose more than we'd gain through an explanation. There's really not much else to say. The story is straightforward and it avoids overcomplicating itself, since for the kind of game that we have it would be unnecessary. It's very clear to me that this was written and executed by people who understand how to handle tonal shifts and knew how best to frame a shot with music and visuals doing the heavy lifting because they weren't relying on dialogue. It's a nicely presented tale that made me feel something. I mean, sure, I still dislike the fake out death right at the end, but then again it was right at the end and I don't think that it really hurts the overall experience too much. Planet of Lana is a good game with a gorgeous aesthetic and a brilliant soundtrack that might not be the most nail-biting experience you'll ever encounter, but it's still definitely worthy of a quick play because it's such a lovely game to exist within. I really do wish that I had more to say, but it's a very short video game. It's like 4 hours at most, depending on how quickly you happen to solve the puzzles, but it's really nice and definitely worth a play. In truth, it bears little resemblance to games like Limbo or Inside. I wrote that part of the script before I actually played the game. I only watched the trailer, so I saw some similarities and just kind of went for it. Given that we're playing as a small child lost in a big hostile world where everything wants you dead, you can kind of see where my head was at. It is, however, ultimately a lot less bleak, with a much clearer narrative on display than most of those games, and the comparison kind of falls apart due to the tone and general atmosphere being far less gruesome. I'd say that it definitely has a seat at the small child scary world table, but it doesn't like to stay there much because it prefers to be outside, taking in the pretty scenery and telling people how through perseverance they can usually overcome their greatest trials, whereas the other games are all sat around being miserable at the table together, just hoping one of them actually remembered to bring the razor blades this time. That's all I've got for you. Again, a short video this month, but there's no need to pad out the recommendation for a good game, is there? I had fun, I had a good time, and it's worth giving the game a little bit of love if you haven't already. It's utterly gorgeous, it's got such a great musical score, and the gameplay, whilst not really anything special, is perfectly suited to the type of game that Planet of Lana is, and I just don't have any hate in my heart for what this is. Now, I have 2 other projects in progress, so I'm gonna leave you here. Take care, my loves. As always, do be sure to do the comment like thingy if you enjoyed this video, and sub for more stuff that I do. Also, I have a Discord if you want to swing by and say hi. There's a link in the comments and the description, and hopefully I'll use the right link this time, not the wrong one that doesn't work. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? Until we meet again, my dears, take care of yourselves, drink some water, have a nice snack, and we will see you next time.